Writer Ned Ryun, Committee for Responsible Federal Budgets Mark Goldwyn, and market watcher Heather Zimmerraga. Heather, what is going on here? How much of this is tax cut driven?
A lot of this is tax cut driven right now, Neil, and the economy is doing very well. All eyes are on the GDP report coming this Thursday. We have had, this will be the third consecutive growth of over 3%. So that the economy is doing very well on the backs of a deregulatory environment, and hopes for this tax plan to get passed as early as tomorrow, Neil.
You know, Mark, there are different numbers you're given as to whether tax cuts are paid for or not. I find that obsession a little out of place, considering the fact that along with the cost of the tax cuts, if you want to cost them out, we have another $9 to $10 trillion in additional debt on just conventional spending that's grown under Democrats and Republicans. Yet I don't hear a lot of yammering about that. What do you think of that?
Well, I yammer about that all the time, Neil. We have a structural disconnect between the amount we're spending, particularly on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and the amount that we're bringing in on revenue. And one of the big problems with this tax bill is that it makes that gap worse. It makes it larger.
So this doesn't help matters any. Ned, now there is the argument that those who've been pushing this tax cut advance, that the growth we'll get from the tax cuts alone would at least take care of the cost of the tax cuts. They can't necessarily wipe out the other $9 to $10 trillion in added spending that will add to the debt in that period of time. But what do you make of that argument?
You know, Neil, that's a claim that has no basis so far.
No, I would actually argue that that it will pay for itself in many ways. I guess part of the problem I have with this, though, Neil, is the fact we can't have truly have tax reform unless we have entitlement reform, as the previous guest just mentioned. Right. So I think we have to have that conversation sooner rather than later. I guess
but they never do. They never do have that conversation.
No, they never do,
party.
Because they're afraid. They're afraid of what it actually means when it comes to their preservation in office. But I will say this, Neil, the thing that frustrates me a little bit about this bill, and I would caution Republicans to be very careful on this, don't oversell that this is a middle-class tax cut. Because when they're saying that a family making $73,000 a year is going to get $2,000 back, that's only $40 a week. That's hardly earth-shattering. And I think the other thing that's frustrating to me, Neil, about this is they gave a 21% permanent rate to the corporations and a temporary, essentially 29.6 rate to the small business pass-through. And I would argue the greater impact for the middle class comes through the smaller business guys. And if they have more money, say if they put it at 25%, I think you would have had a greater impact sooner on middle class being hired and increase in wages. And so I think that's something that has to be addressed moving forward.
Well, not addressed now, though. Heather, the one thing I think that both guests touched on, the idea of the impact this will have from various viewpoints. And one is, as I said on this show, it's all about the net. What you see in your paycheck, presumably next February when we get it. Do you, Heather, think that it will be substantial enough that people will change their spending habits, maybe what we're seeing now in terms of holiday and related sales as an example of that? What do you think?
Retail sales are doing very well. I believe we are at 5.8% year over year. Last week the data came in, so that looks good. But
what's driving
unfortunately,
that? What's driving it?
I think that the markets being up as much as they are have to do with it in terms of those that own stocks. And I know the pushback, Neil, is, well, not everybody owns stocks. And I get that. But hopefully over the long run, at least, if not in the short term, that all this money that corporations are receiving from repatriation or lower effective tax rate will go into hiring workers and increasing wages. It won't be right away, but over time.
That's the thing. It won't be right away. Mark, that's what worries some folks. What do you think of that?
Agreed.
Well, in the near term, I think this is going to go to buybacks. In the medium term, there will be hopefully some wage increases. My concern is the long term, when we have an extra $2 trillion plus of debt of this whole thing, and that's going to start to depress wages and I think turn around any gains we get from that lower corporate rate.
But what about the other $9 to $10 trillion in debt that we're accumulating the conventional way, Ned? No one talks about that.
We got to get that debt under control too.
Works.
Ned, go ahead.
Funny how that works, Neil. And going back, I mean, if you add up Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, throw in our debt payments, the interest on our debt, you're getting close to about 70% of federal government spending before you can even get to defense spending. And I'm making the argument, this is unsustainable. that if we can't continue down this path without real entitlement reform, we can't have true tax reform. Because let's not forget, when we talk about giving $2,000 back to the family making $73,000, you're giving them their own money back. We need to start giving the American people more of their own money back into their pockets right now. And again, like you've said, and we've had this conversation, there has to be a noticeable net increase in people's paychecks for them to notice. And I'm not fully convinced, especially in the next year or two, that will actually happen.
Why didn't we get that then? It just makes no sense. We haven't had tax reform since 1986, and this is what we can come up with. We, meaning Republicans, have the House and the Senate, and we can't do a little better. Middle-class Americans getting
I wish
cut.
we had more time, guys.
Really
it is what it is for the time being. We'll have to watch very, very closely tomorrow. It could be a moot point when it's voted on, and maybe in rapid-fire fashion and signed by the president before Christmas, we are told, which is next week. Can you believe that? All right. Thank you guys very much. I apologize for all this breaking news.